Duncan, it's, good customer outcomes comes from running good businesses delivered by quality people who are on the front line, right? And that's a legal piece, but it's also a cultural and behavioural and professional piece, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it's very important, and I'd like to think the industry is trying to do this generally. I mean, I like to think an insurance broker is a professional advisor. So like engineers, accountants, architects, lawyers, doctors, anyone else you want to talk about, I mean, that is where the industry needs to be, and that's how it should be regarded, I think, and it needs to prove itself as a professional industry. We do truly act in the best interest of client, and they get the right policy at a good price. That's the fundamental test at the end of the day. In the same way as when you go to the doctor or the accountant or the lawyer, who else you're talking about, you want to get the right service at a sensible price.
And that really kind of plays into the trust and confidence piece that the sector and our reputation as we take our sector into the marketplace, right?
Yeah, I agree entirely. So, I mean, reality is that no one's perfect, including me, that there are always going to be little mistakes made unintentionally by people. There's going to be technical breaches and all these things. That's just reality in any organisation. But what we need to be able to say to our client, because it's all about the client at the end of the day, have we given you the right policy at a fair price? I mean, if there's no customer loss and they've got that, then everyone should be happy. We don't need to get overexcited about the fact that maybe we forgot to give you a financial services guide, or we forgot to give you whatever the piece of paper is. It doesn't really matter. It's got to be material, and it's all about the customer's best interests. And up to a point, some documents they don't want to read anyway, because they're relying on you as an insurance broker to tell the important bits. They don't want to read 1,000 pages.
Thanks, Duncan. Alyssa, risks, opportunities, 2025?
I think there's a big opportunity, because when we talk about risk, we go straight to insurance. And while insurance is a very important tool in managing risk, it is only one part of risk. And so I think there's a big opportunity to kind of shift the conversation to risk management and how we address the underlying risk and the factors that are affecting that. Both as a way to make insurance more affordable and more accessible. But as we're seeing new risks emerge, we can't just go straight to insurance to solve those. There does need to be more risk management, more conversations with clients about how they can manage their risks, more conversations with government about how they can help Australian small businesses, large businesses, manage these risks, especially, like I said, in the emerging areas like cyber, like climate related risks.
And from NIBA's perspective over the next 12 months, I mean, I think spending time thinking that through and figuring out who we need to spend time with. Alexandra, it feels like the ICA has done a really excellent job around educating politicians, regulators and so on in terms of some of the key issues the Minister spoke about this morning. I mean, that's clearly been a very deliberate game plan. It seems to have really paid dividends in terms of the maturity of the discussions.
Well, we try to, that's for sure. It's not always easy, but we do recognise that all of these topics are complicated, and any sort of complicated product discussion or complicated legislative and regulatory environment, there are going to be instances where things don't go the way that we would like them to, and while thankfully they are the small number of instances, that's in no way diminishing the fact that when it does happen, it's really unfortunate, and we do see some really poor outcomes. So that education piece around where things can go wrong, why they go wrong, what we have in place to fix them when they do go wrong, and where we might need to look at other ways of addressing some of these issues, that's absolutely really critical. And again, it's not just the insurance sector that does this. We work with our colleagues across banking, for example, when we're looking at areas where there's really significant natural catastrophe exposure and people may be struggling to get insurance. We need to deal with our colleagues in the banking sector because they're loaning against these properties. And again, our consumer advocates, we need to work with them to be able to explain to governments where harms are, and to consumers what options they have when these things, either go right or go wrong. How do we get the right messages to consumers too?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me there's a real mindset around the sector looking to engage. Look, things will go wrong, and when natural catastrophes happen, we heard it from David yesterday around the number of complaints and the size of the issues. We heard from Shane Fitzsimmons yesterday morning about the magnitude of, so when the pressure's on the system, it's not just insurance system, it's the community, it's the country. When systems get stressed and pressured, sometimes things go wrong. It feels like there's a bit of a mindset of both acknowledging that, but also then, well, how do you lean into that and actually see to fix it?
Absolutely. And it's not only when things go wrong. I mean, we have, obviously we've got our personal lines. We look after a range of commercial lines as well. And we do get calls from business sectors that are saying, look, we're really stressed. We can't get insurance, or it's really, really expensive. What are we going to do about this? And in those instances, often the broker is our best friend, because we can say to them, are you using a specialised broker who deeply understands your business sector? Do they have the right contacts? And often, if we find a broker who has a really deep subject matter knowledge of that particular area, so live music is a really good example. I've just been recently appearing at a parliamentary committee hearing into the live music sector because they are really challenged with insurance affordability. As I often say, booze, late nights, slippery floors, you're in for a bad time. But, we do know that there are brokers out there who are really specialised, or a good time actually, depending on, which way you go. I should clarify that. But, we do find brokers that are really specialised in dealing with those risks, helping the businesses work on their risk profile, so they can reduce the risk in their business and then articulate that very clearly to their insurers. So it's that whole of ecosystem stuff.
Yeah, nice. Hey, I'm going to move on to the second topic area, which is around scrutiny and government scrutiny. We picked it up a little earlier on, but obviously the last few months have provided a number of examples of things happen, governments react. Strata's probably the obvious one. There's obviously some stuff going on in workers' comp, certainly in WA, as well as in New South Wales. Alyssa, I'll start with you on this one. I mean, what's your sense about how does the sector handle that kind of scrutiny? What different skill sets do we need to think about so that we're actually ready to engage and not just kind of shut up shop and become defensive about stuff that might turn up?
I think it's really difficult. In the almost 5 years that I've been at NIBA, I don't think I've had a break. Obviously, the pace of change is really feeling relentless. We've had 2 quite significant reviews. So we had the Australian Law Reform Commission look at the structure of the Corporations Act. For any of those that haven't seen it, it's great bedtime reading for the next 20 years of your life. But then we also had the Quality of Advice Review. And I think when we're talking about these changes, there is a bit of a risk for the amount of change that we're putting on businesses, especially small and medium-sized brokerages, because they can't absorb the increased compliance costs as easily, and they may have smaller portfolios, which means they can't spread those costs across. NIBA and the IBCCC have done some work on simplifying the reporting to kind of reduce that administrative burden on brokers and the way that they report against the code, and I think work like that is really important. But I also think that government needs to be looking at the laws. I mean, I don't really want to be advocating for another wholesale review of insurance law and insurance obligations, but I think government needs to be looking at the laws that are in place, the intent, as we keep coming back to good customer outcomes, but the intent of those laws, those regulations, and whether or not they're achieving their purpose, because I think everyone in this room could probably point to some obligations that are no longer achieving their purpose.
Duncan, same question to you, just around scrutiny, government, regulators, consumers.
Well, I think at the moment, I think we know from the code review, General Insurance Code of Practice, and also the recent Senate report, it's all about claims, really. And I think that's one part of broking which is not fully understood. And I think the average person probably doesn't really know what an insurance broker does, but I think the average person might have an idea from mortgage broking or something. They must arrange an insurance policy like a mortgage broker arranges a loan. But the big thing, which I think is very underappreciated by insurance brokers, is they can really help clients with claims. Now, yes, some claims are difficult, and you have disasters, and insurers have so much in terms of resources, but I always think sometimes if you want to go to court or AFCA, maybe a lawyer can give you an idea on what the claim will be. But brokers deal with claims as part of their business and have been for decades. They sort of know what the market is on claims. I just really think brokers should just emphasise that aspect of what they do. Because from my point of view, the most fundamental thing, lots of fundamental things, one of the most fundamental things about insurance is all about valid claims paid promptly. And that's where brokers, I think, can really add a lot of emphasis. And I think from the recent inquiries, that's where some of the complaints are coming from. They think claims are taking too long to be settled. So that's a combination of factors. But I think brokers within reason can help valid claims get paid promptly.
Is that a message you think we need to take in a more active way to politicians, to regulators, to consumer groups?
I think so, but especially clients, because Alyssa referred to risk management. I think brokers are really great at risk management, but they need to, I think the client needs to understand it. Most of the time the answer will be insurance risk transfer, but there may be another risk management alternative you can try. Sometimes you want to try a mutual or some other thing. It might be another risk management type of advice, which might be in the client's best interest. But I mean, I think it's all about as I said earlier, it's all about the client. You need to explain to the client what service you can provide, and it's not just arranging the right policy at the right price. It's also helping you getting the valid claim paid promptly. And I think that's really what people want at the end of the day. They've paid good money, cost of living, pay good money for a product that should respond when it needs to respond fairly.
Awesome. Alexandra, same question to you. I mean, you've spoken about Dr. Molino's report. There's a risk, isn't there? And you pointed a little earlier. Perhaps you can expand a little on the risk the sector faces, either if we don't grab the opportunity to change, or we kind of wait until regulators, government says stuff needs to change, and then we become, I guess, passengers on that journey rather than drivers.
Yeah. And look, I think everyone wants to be the driver. There's that old saying that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that's not a good outcome, really. So you want to be at the table, engaging with the regulators, and ideally engaging with them early. And, you know, I've never come across a regulator who is sitting there thinking, I'm just out to get the sector. They're actually looking to solve a problem. And when we see problems in the sector, you know, they don't pass the pub test. Consumers are not happy, and we can't sit here and say, oh, well, not our problem. We do have to deal with those issues. So at the ICA, certainly we've got a very proactive, forward-leaning way of dealing with politicians, regulators, others. And, you know, when we see a problem, we reach out and we say, look, can we have a chat about this? Is there a way to fix it? And again, you know, doing that in a very thoughtful and considered way to make sure that we're not just ripping a band-aid off and hoping for the best. That's absolutely critical. But I think in no way would we ever think to ourselves, oh, we're not going to touch this. Not least because so often sunlight's a disinfectant. We need to see what the problem is. We need to deeply understand it, and then we need to look for ways to address it.
I've always found that, you know, when there's a problem on the table, when government, when regulators, when the sector and when consumers get together on the same side of the table, you kind of tend to get much better outcomes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it gets pretty adversarial. How do you kind of manage, how do we collectively manage through that to get everyone on the same side of the table?
It's tricky, and I think fundamentally we have to all remember that we're all there with good intent. Again, I don't think I've ever come across working for longer than I'd care to admit in advocacy positions and policy positions, I don't think I've ever come across someone who has genuinely come to one of these conversations with ill intent. We may have different views of the way to get to the right solution, or indeed what the right solution is, but provided we all accept that we're there to make sure that no harm is done, that people get what they're entitled to, that they're supported when they need support, I think we can all have a rational conversation about things. And, you know, one of the things with, for example, the 101 recommendations from the code review, one of the things that we're challenging ourselves to do is, if we're not sure about the recommendation itself, we're really looking at it to understand what the intent of the recommendation is. So how can we identify the harm that that recommendation is determined to solve? Once we've done that, we can say, okay, we agree this is a harm that needs to be solved. Is this recommendation the most effective way of doing that, or would there be a better way to get to that outcome? And doing that in good faith, I think, is important.
Interesting. So you've opened the door to our last topic, which is self-regulation, and a big welcome to Prue, to Drew, and to Oscar from the IBCCC and from AFCA. Alyssa, I'll go to you first. Role of self-regulation. How important is it, and how important is it to kind of do it with a leadership perspective in mind, rather than, oh, this is something we just kind of need to do to kind of protect our bases?
I think when you're talking about self-regulation, and I'll just pick up on a point Alexandra made, you're always going to self-regulation with good intent. The code is not there as a shield. To me, it's a badge. And it's something that we can proudly showcase as a reflection of brokers' commitment to their clients and to the broader industry. I think self-regulation has many benefits. Anyone that's worked in and around government, or even just observed government from the outside, knows that change quite often takes a lot of time, which means governments aren't always able to respond to emerging issues before there's a chance for harm to be caused. Self-regulation, we can. And I think that's one of the big benefits of self-regulation. From a profession standpoint, I think it's a great way to kind of, almost as a sandbox for when we want to increase professionalism, when we want to increase standards, we can do that incrementally. We can take members along on a journey and kind of feel around, figure out how long that's going to take, and moving towards, a big picture and a big idea. Whereas with legislation, it comes in, you have a chance to have a say, they may or may not listen, the bill comes out, and then you've got, a 12-month period before it becomes enforceable. Whereas self-regulation, we can really take our members along on that journey, and we can also kind of broadcast what our goals as an industry are. So, we say in Australia, we don't have a State of the Union address. So in government, the only way for them to talk about what their priorities are is through the budget. For the insurance broking profession, when we talk about what our priorities are for the insurance broking profession, we communicate that strongly through the code.
So you're suggesting that NIBA should have a State of the Union address. Hey, really interesting comments. I'm just going to pick up the thread, which is about bringing the membership on the journey. There's 15,000 participants in NIBA. How do we collectively aggregate that voice as you bring change to many different businesses in many different places who come from many different types of backgrounds?
I thought we were just going to get them all in a room at the same time and let them figure it out. I think that's something that's really important. We do have 15,000 members, but we also have so many other stakeholders within the industry, outside of the industry, consumer groups, regulators, and probably organisations that we wouldn't normally consider to be stakeholders. I think it's really important that when we are looking at self-regulation and change, that we provide as many opportunities as possible for discussion. No idea is a bad idea. Almost no idea is a bad idea. And, really empower people and provide them with the opportunity to voice those opinions. With this code review, the upcoming code review that will probably kick off very shortly, that's something that we've definitely tried to build in, give our membership the opportunity to provide their comments, give all of our stakeholders opportunities to provide their comments, and also have really clear guidance from NIBA about what we see as the self-aspirational goals that we're trying to achieve.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa. Duncan, your take on self-regulation?
Well, I'm a big fan of self-regulation, Richard, because I think the industry can make it specific for insurance broking. The big problem with the Corporations Act is one size fits all, and it doesn't really suit broking very well. the old-fashioned Agents and Brokers Act, I think, was brilliant legislation. Unfortunately, someone decided to have another go through Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act, and they're thinking of having another go with Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act. So be it. I just think the industry has a great opportunity through the Code of Practice to get some really good self-regulation. And one thing I'll say, which might be a little bit controversial, I'll say it anyway, I think the code needs to have some real teeth in it. Someone else can decide what the teeth should be, because it's got to be more than lip service. It's got to, if you want self-regulation, it's got to be real regulation, it's got to be compliance, and if need be, some penalties attached. And that way the industry can say, for some reason, we've got the Insurance Contract Act in Australia, because insurance is a specialised product, a complex product. No other contract act out there, it's just the Insurance Contracts Act. We want to have a self-regulation NIBA Code of Practice which fits in with the Contracts Act and insurance broking generally. And over here, if you want to have Corporations Act or something else, so be it, because that might suit another industry, but we are brokers who do insurance, risk management. We want something specific to us.
I've heard in the 5 months I've been in NIBA lots of code conversations from lots of members, and mostly with great amount of pride around the role that code plays in their professional practice. I imagine within Steadfast that's a big part of the discussions that take place.
Well, that's right. I mean, Steadfast, as we know, provides services to its network, and there's other choices in that regard. So it's all about good customer outcomes, as we've already said more than once, and that's how we need to explain it. I think in terms of dealing with the various other stakeholders out there, I think it's important in the conversations with the regulators or whoever they may be that you have calm conversations and you explain what an insurance broker does. As I said earlier, I'm not sure everyone really understands that. People might have an idea what home and motor means or something, but when you get to more business style insurances, it's not obvious what a broker can add to that. And if people understand what a broker is trying to do, I sometimes find these with some regulators who I won't name, that they don't have this idea of insurance but don't really understand in particular what a broker does as part of the process. And I think if people understand what the broking point of view is better, and yes, the consumer lobbies and the regulators and the insurers and other people have a point of view, and we come together and we have a good compromise, I think that's in the interest of everyone. So I just think it's probably partly just an explanation job, because I think we understand how insurance broking work, but if you know with your family and friends at barbecues or whatever else you do, if you say to someone, I'm an insurance broker, as I said earlier, I'm not sure everyone understands what that really means. So I think it's partly an education, explanation concept.
Awesome, thank you. Alexander, last but same question to you.
Yeah, I might take a slightly different tack and just talk about the value of a code for consumers. So, in Corporations Act, Insurance Contracts Act, the legislative and regulatory framework that governs financial services is incredibly complicated. And for most consumers, not all, but for most, if they don't think their insurer's done something quite right, or they have a bit of beef with what's gone on, they're probably not going to go and read the corporations legislation, and nor should they have to. So the codes are a really great way to be a more accessible, consumer-friendly way of saying to consumers, here are the protections that we're offering you, here are your rights and your responsibilities, and also give them another path to go if they have a dispute with their insurer. So, perhaps you go to your insurer and say, I think you might have stuffed up here on the code, we think you've got a problem. The insurer will take you through the IDR process, obviously, but if you still think there's a problem, going through the code review panel as opposed to going through ASIC or the ACCC, or heaven forbid having to take your insurer to court, because again, very few consumers will have the capacity to do that. So I think they play an incredibly important role from that consumer protection side of things, as well as the what are we expecting of our sector side of things.
You raised the point a little earlier, and folks asked a question. You raised the point a little earlier around the ICA code, the review, and whilst the ICA and NIBA are different entities, our communities, there's a lot of intersect clearly. How do we make sure that the codes have some kind of alignment or some kind of engagement, so either they're not at each other or they're not too aligned if that's a bad thing.
Well, inconsistency wouldn't be great. So I think as we go through our process and as you lead up to your code review process, I think you're going to be seeing a lot of me, guys, I'm afraid. We'll be having a lot of chats, making sure that we're aligning where possible, yeah, making sure that we don't have those discrepancies or those conflicts in those documents. So as always, just continuing the wonderful relationship we have with you.
Awesome. Hey, last question, very short answer, please. What are you most looking forward to in the next 12 months with a government reg or policy perspective? And I might start with you, Alex.
Gosh, asking me to be crisp is a challenge. What am I most looking forward to? I suppose there's a lot on our plate, but I am a super nerd, so I kind of and I'm looking forward to really getting into some of the nutty issues with our members, with other stakeholders, and making sure we get better outcomes on the other side.
Awesome.
So my short answer is good discussion, respectful discussion, understanding discussion, compromise when compromise should occur. That will solve a lot of problems.
And Alyssa, last word to you.
I always say that the code is my baby. So I am most looking forward to seeing my baby become a toddler and going through the code review process all over again.
And we're about to make an announcement imminently about the appointment of our code reviewer. So stand by for that one.
Are we getting an exclusive?
No.
I can try.
Hey, folks, on behalf of all of us in the audience, hopefully that was insightful, reflective, and kind of gave you a bit of a sense of what's really on the boil for this panel. So on behalf of all of us here, a big thank you.